This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Thursday morning. It's October 10th. And coming up on today's show, we're going to start by spending some time discussing Rob Dillingham, just given the trade and I think kind of Ant's ascension and just the expectations of this team. I find myself kind of feeling like I've forgotten that the Wolves have added the number 8 overall pick from this summer's draft to this squad, and I don't want to forget that. So we should forget that. So I got Kyle Theige here with me to dig into Dillingham, and then also kind of in the second half of the episode, we just put together a bunch of random topics that we're going to sort of rip through before the Wolves play their second preseason game on Friday night. I got Kyle Theige here. Happy birthday, dude. A couple days late, but happy birthday.
Good morning, Dane. Wishing you a wonderful Thursday. Let's engage.
That's such a niche joke.
What's up, man? Thursday. This is kind of, I think, the last, selfishly, but this is kind of like the last real dead point, right? It's been odd to watch. You know, the NBA is starting to pick up, right? I know the WNBA playoffs. Shout out to the Lynx making it to the finals again. An incredible franchise. But with football and WNBA and baseball playoffs, which I kind of maybe want to talk about at the end, the NBA is coming back, and all these teams just have way cooler preseason schedules. Like, they play every third day. So for some reason, the Wolves had a full week off, and we have nothing else to talk about. But yeah, I think today's pod should be pretty exciting because, yeah, the Towns trade, in my mind, and I think in your mind, kind of prevented us from really digging into or remembering that, yeah, the team that made the Western Conference Finals and then kind of choked added a lottery pick to their foundation, right? Like, they didn't just draft a guy that you thought, oh man, you know, they got him at 25, this is going to be exciting. They added a real core piece that I think down the road, you know what his role is going to be, right? When he's year 3, year 4 playing alongside Ant, but right now you don't know what it's going to be, but he also addresses a lot of things that led to their demise last season. So, yeah, I think it's time today that we talk about Rob Dillingham again, because maybe not game 1, but I think as the season progresses, he's going to have a very valuable role on this team.
Yeah, it's been cool. We talked to him yesterday with media. I'll play a clip later. I guess just like the word and obviously it's all positive words about the rookie and all that. But what I do believe is just hearing from different people in the organization and stuff, and Finch, like he's talked about, the players have talked about when they've done interviews, is that he like really has been a sponge, and he really has been, you know, sort of trying to take this all in, specifically on the defensive side of the floor, right? Like, knowing that's his weakness, he'll name it, and trying to do the learn the things, understand the things that he has to do so as to, you know, be passable on that side of the floor. And you and I can really go off of, right, is what we can watch the Kentucky stuff. You know, we did that. We could watch the preseason game, but, you know, we go off of Summer League too. And I did get, you know, not knowing Rob Dillingham from whatever, I did get the sense at Summer League, being at those games, doing the interviews with him afterwards, that he was told to do X, Y, and Z, and he did X, Y, and Z. And in ways that maybe like kind of hurt some of his performance in Summer League, which definitely got me and you those first couple games like, oh,
right,
might not be a year 1 guy. But in the process of like doing things in order, doing what you're told, you're not necessarily doing what you're best at. And I think that was part of his Summer League story. And he's been dedicated to X, Y, and Z over this, you know, how long has it been? Since July, you know, 5 months since he was playing in, is that right? No, 3 months since Summer League. And I think he's continued like honing some of those things. He's still 19. Like Finch said in his interview with Britt, what are reasonable expectations for him? You know, to be effective 1 in every 3 games. That's what that is. Direct quote from Finch. So I started thinking about this by, you know, kind of, I didn't really know what to say. Like, what are my reasonable expectations? What should I think? And I just went to the draft last year. Do you remember who the 8th overall pick was last year? Because I think it's a perfect example.
I should, but I don't.
Jarris Walker from the Pacers.
Pacers, okay.
And they trade for Siakam, right, at the deadline last year. But if you go to the beginning of last year with the Pacers, it was they had Obi Toppin and Jalen Smith at power forward. Like clearly their weakest position, the position that lacked depth, much like the Wolves at point guard, was power forward. And Jarris Walker didn't play. He had the opportunity was there for it. They were at least average to above average team, and they needed some production there. And he wasn't able to step in and fill that role. And then obviously they go on and get Siakam. And I don't say that to mean like that's what's going to happen with Rob, but it's a good reminder of like what the norm is kind of there, because the 7th overall pick was Bilal Coulibaly in Washington, and the 9th pick was Hendricks. And it was kind of the same thing for all those guys, 7, 8, and 9. Like none of them had good productive seasons. They were all in different caliber of teams and kind of took different arcs to the season. Again, Walker just didn't really play. They deemed in Indiana he wasn't ready to contribute to that rotation, and maybe that's just because Indiana was like a little bit too good. Coulibaly played a ton, 63 games, played 27 minutes per game last season, but of a player who played in a lot of games and a lot of minutes, he was one of the least productive in the league, just from like an estimated plus minus standpoint, right? The only players who were less productive in EPM who played 40 plus games and 15 plus minutes per game were Grady Dick, 13th overall pick last season, Nick Smith Jr., 27th overall pick last season for Charlotte, Malachi Branham, 20th pick in the 2022 draft, and Scoot Henderson, the 3rd overall pick in the 23 draft, which is just a reminder to all that we hear this all the time, right? Like it's hard to rely on production in year one from a rookie, particularly a guard, right? And I think that should be some of the expectation for Rob, but he's being put into a different sort of role than that. He's not going to start. He's the 9th man, night one for the Wolves. So I think that changes the context a little bit. He
Imagine
isn't
that.
the Coulibaly story.
The 8th pick is the 9th man.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
and so it's like he does have probably a different path than Walker, probably a different path than Coulibaly. Hendricks played in the G League like the whole first half of the season, the 9th overall pick. Taylor Hendricks for the Jazz. He played at the end of the season once the Jazz started tanking. So I say that all to remind myself that like this is what guys did at his spot last season. But again, he enters a pretty different situation than even Walker, who I think is a decent comp and happens to be the 8th overall pick last year. And I think we should just remind ourselves of that probably at a minimum, it's going to be a while until he's productive, like into the season. Or if he is productive right away, that should really be celebrated, because that is not the norm for this caliber of player. And I could see any of those paths sort of coming to fruition. And I don't think any of them should be crazy to expect or overreact or underreact to. It's like, got to kind of give this some time to breathe into whatever it's going to become.
That's really smart, and that really helps me kind of adjust my perspective of what to expect from Rob early on. I don't know if, again, fantasy football brain is still very strong in this household, but I've had like a little bit of, and this is just on the field, let's not talk off the field, like just a little Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers type stuff, where I just think Rob, at some point, Rob is going to be asked to be the quarterback. I mean, unless you disagree, but like at some point he is going to be asked to be the starting point guard of the Minnesota Timberwolves. But they don't need him right now. Anything he does give them is value. The DiVincenzo stuff, I think, we need to talk about that now, because 2 weeks ago, you had Rob slotted in this role, or whatever that role is. Right. And that role has, in my opinion, been turned upside down with DiVincenzo, because one of our questions coming into the season when we were doing August and September pods was, who's the backup point guard? And then it kind of came to fruition that Nikhil has been working on it all summer, right? Like that, he wants to, his words, like support Mike and back up Mike. And now you have DiVincenzo, who can just organically do that as well. And then Ant, playing with the ball a little bit more in his hands. So yeah, I think Rob, The thing that I've heard from Rob, going back to kind of, you talked about a lot of draft stuff when I was at Media Day, is that, I mean, everyone watches his highlight package of Summer League or Kentucky or this first preseason game against the Lakers, and he's a hooper. Like, he probably does have a top 10 handle, maybe in the entire league already at 19. But people had told me, like, he interviewed pretty well. He's really shy, and I've got to talk to him now multiple times in Vegas and Minneapolis. But that thing about being a sponge, I don't want to, like, overlook that, because that's kind of like a core competency for me, for anyone looking for advice in anything. You know, like, you're new in a job, is you don't need to be the smartest person in the room on day one. You don't need to ask the most questions. Like, just show up and kind of take it all in and find mentors. And you could probably, can you find a better point guard mentor than like Mike Conley? Can you find a better just, guys having in your corner than Nas or Jaden, who are now, as Jaden said, like a vet? Like, these guys are 23, 24, 25, but Nas Reed's the longest tenured guy on the team, and he's 25. So I think they see how hard he works, how respectful he is. Again, he's shy, he is humble, he has a ton of swag, but he also knows, because that's different too, right? Like, you're the 8th overall pick. You're coming in like, dude, I'm the 8th overall pick. And he has basically, from what people have said internally, done the opposite of that. Just like, I'm just here to learn, be a sponge, pick up as much as I can, especially on the defensive end, which I think he has a lot of room to figuratively grow. He's never actually going to grow, but just learning concepts and things. Like, he had a really cool quote about, like, not being close enough into the ball. Just like little things like that, hey, this isn't Kentucky anymore. Like, you gotta, every inch matters. So I'm really excited for him, if nothing else. I believe, Dane, that we love the draft in football and baseball and basketball, but where you go, to me, a lot of the time is way more important than what number you go. And I don't think, this is kind of like, the Nas stuff. Like, if Nas was on a different team, he could have 30 a game, right? It's like, well, he doesn't need to have 30 a game because he's on maybe one of the most talented teams in the West. Rob could have been drafted by the Hornets and played alongside LaMelo and had 25 shots a game.
But I'm saying it probably ends up being Scoot then, right? Or like it could, or Nick Smith Jr. is like kind of a similar like type of player, and it was a struggle because they played for the Hornets and they played for the Blazers. Like, I take that to, I do think we're getting to the point where, and remember Josh Minot talked about this at Media Day too, right? Where it's like, I'm not sure that when you're 19 and coming in, and particularly when you maybe need to like add some physicality to your game, that it is a good idea to go out there and be like, here you go, 28 minutes a game. Like that, I think if I was an agent, I'm not sure that's what I would want my 19-year-old prospect to get right away. And he's not going to get that in Minnesota. But he does have a role and an opportunity. It really feels to me, again, if I'm in Rob's camp, like, I like this. I like where I'm at, because he's going to play, right? They are still thin on point guard, but he's not going to play too much. And I think the too much stuff, the overexposure stuff, can and has been, sort of dangerous.
And he might catch a DNP one night.
Sure.
And guess what? I would tell you right now, the chances the Timberwolves won that game probably just increased if he doesn't play. And I don't mean that like as a slam against him. It's just, hey, we don't need you tonight. You know what I mean? Just continue to learn, continue to be a sponge, soak it all up. But we're playing the Pistons, and we want the Pistons to win, I know. But like DiVincenzo and Nikhil are going to play the backup point. We're going to be up by 20. Like, I think he is in a great spot, even though, to your point, and this is kind of the big picture of it, he could have gone elsewhere. I mean, the Spurs. Let's just talk about, like, he could have been drafted by the Spurs.
Sure.
And had a lot of cool highlights playing with Wemby, but really struggled or been asked to do too much. Maybe they don't get Chris Paul, and like, hey, you're the guy, and you got to elevate this team that it probably has a, like Wemby's window is like kind of now. Like, we want to win games. And I don't know if Rob is totally ready to win games at 19, and it has nothing to do with his size or makeup. 19-year-olds aren't built to win, just like Ant wasn't when he came into the league. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not how this works. So I think, selfishly and biased aside, like, I think Rob is in one of the best spots he can be, because he was gushing over what he's learned from Mike, and, just being next to Mike in practice or in the locker room or whatever, having guys like DiVincenzo, having guys that have been high picks, that have gone through the system and the business of it. I just am really excited for him. I was excited for him 2 months ago. I'm even more excited for him now to see how the team has embraced him. But again, to that DiVincenzo part, which is a new wrinkle in the last 7 to 10 days, I do think whatever your expectations were for Rob in year one, they have to be cut by a third, because I just think there's going to be more minutes going to other players because you just added another really, really good guard in the backcourt.
Well, at a minimum, he moved from expected to be the 8th man to the 9th man.
But it's big, right?
Yeah.
That could be a sizable amount of minutes that get lost.
And I think that's kind of, again, I think works. And then once an injury inevitably happens to one of the 8 guys above him, it's okay. We're 15 games into the season, and if Rob is showing you something in that small 9th man role, you're like, all right, now if you're Finch, you go, we can expand this. We want to expand it. Whereas he might have had to start at that expanded role day one if you don't make that trade. I said, did you watch the Dillingham clip? I was like, well, I need to clip this just because Ant said this exact same thing his first year. Like, them dudes is big. Like, he gets up my screens. I'll play that clip right now.
Definitely getting over the screen. Dudes be big, super big. Rudy setting the screen on you. You might get over one, but then he set one right back, and you got to get over it. He's gonna hold you a little bit. So really just getting over screens and yeah.
How valuable is that in practice, being able to go against Rudy and Julius, do the better screen setters?
It's super valuable because, like, even though I'm not first string, I can try to get in every rep I can behind Mike, because practice is where you gonna play the game. If you don't do it in practice, then how you gonna do it in the game? So really, I just be trying to work and get everything right in practice, so when the game comes, I know what I'm doing.
Rob, when Ant was your age, or when Rudy came, he was a little bit younger. He said he never played with like a 7-footer before, and it took him a little bit of time to figure out like how to play with Rudy.
Right.
Do you feel like do you have experience playing with like a big lob threat guy like that, or are you learning that still?
I'd say Rudy's a little bit better for sure. He's in the NBA.
Yeah, right.
But I definitely play with a bunch of 7-footers, but not just a bunch. Like, you got to know your personnel, so it's not a lot of dudes that can catch ooze. But some at Kentucky, I had Wanamir, DiVincenzo, a few players for sure. So definitely got a bunch of players I play with.
So I play that because I wanted to play that first clip, because obviously that is a difficulty of just like coming into the league and needing to navigate screens and needing to navigate size. It was an issue for Ant, who was 6'4", 230 when he came in. It was an issue for Ant for a couple of years. But that is my ultimate question, like with Rob right now, is how ready is he for the size of the NBA? And the size of the NBA is the physicality of the screeners, but it's also, I think, just as relevant is the Rudy part and Julius Randle. Like, he hasn't played with a lot of guys who play like Rudy and Julius, or are as big as Rudy and Julius are. And again, to use the Ant comparison, Ant talked about that like the whole first year with Rudy. He's like, I'm still learning this. Like, Ant said I'd never played with a 7-footer in my life before, AAU or at Georgia, and there was a acclimation process. I think that's an advantage of Rob being a little bit more like on the circuit in AAU, probably has played alongside more size or against more size than Ant did at that stage. And then also, Kentucky versus Georgia, like those are kind of different things, different experiences. So while Ant is bigger, I think Rob has a little bit more experience playing with and against size. And that's important. Doesn't mean he's going to be great at it right away, because again, he's smaller than Ant. But I think that's a big variable in this, is how ready Rob is ready for the size of the NBA.
And that's why I think the stuff about him interviewing well, being pretty humble, being shy in a sense, and just being a sponge was something you and I should have probably thought about earlier this summer when we were talking about, because we hammered the size thing, right? Or I hammered the size thing. And this is unfair to Rob, as we just talked about, lower expectations. But, watching the Spurs the other night, and Chris Paul, who is 6 foot 175, and Rob's like 6'3", 6'2", maybe, in platform heels.
6'1".
But, Chris Paul has never grown and has never been bigger, but it was just his ability to learn the game and being, one of the smartest players to basically ever play. For Rob, I know it's a really lame analogy, but the quarterback thing where you're sitting behind a star quarterback, whatever, I think if Rob just continues to learn the game more, he's not going to be 6'6". He'll never be ant size and weight. But if he just knows more about the intricacies of how to run a pick and roll, with a big lob threat like Rudy, or guys that can spread the floor like Nas or Randle or whatever. I just think the more mental reps he gets, and it sounds like he's getting a ton of them right now in training camp, the better. So I don't know. I was always high on him. I'm high on a lot of young Wolves players. That's just kind of how we do it in the fan base. But I think he is on the right path to succeed. And I think the fact that they bring in a DiVincenzo who will chew up more minutes early on, it might, stock down a little bit for Rob early on. You're not going to get paid out on that profit in November, but it'll just give him even more ability to relax and not be dependent on. Because the last thing you want to do is be like, hey, we're trying to just elevate one more time to the finals, and we need the 19-year-old kid to not mess up. And now I think he's going to be given even more leash to mess up, or just have nights where, hey, we don't need you, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, and the there's nights we don't need you part is because they do have Mike who can run the point, and will run. This is the starter. He's going to play 28 minutes a night or whatever. You have Ant who can take on some lead ball handler duties, though we know they want to keep Ant like at the 2 as his primary position. There are other options, like we said at the beginning, of Nickeil and Donte DiVincenzo to play point guard. But to extend your quarterback analogy, like at the point, Nickeil and Donte are game manager quarterbacks, right? And and I wonder how effective either of them are going to be in a spread pick and roll look, right? Where that you got to have some craft. You got to have some skill. You got to not be like a game manager quarterback to really play in spread pick and roll. Cause you got to be, they bring 2 up there. You got to be able to split that. You got to be able to navigate that. Whereas if they blitz Nickeil or even Donte, that could kind of overwhelm them, and Rob, there's more that he can do, to your point with the handle that and at times he's going to get overwhelmed by the size of the coverage and those sort of things. But when you talk about spread pick and roll guys, or guys who can break it down and get to the middle of the floor from the point guard position, who can do that on this team other than Rob Dillingham? That's not really Mike's game. Mike's going to get downhill and attack a drop and take his floater and find Rudy on the lob, but he's not really your crafty. He's crafty, but you know what I'm saying? There's not that burst that he has at point guard. So I think Rob, even though he's now a little bit more quote unquote buried at the point guard position, he's still a unique type of point guard within the context of this team. So again, if he hits, if he's able to take this on and take on a real role in the league, it's going to be uniquely valuable to the context of this roster. And I'm curious to see what that is. And from the film I've watched of him at Kentucky, and it just in that preseason game or even in summer league, the thing that stood out to me that did not mirror the scouting reports I read about him is the playmaking. I think the playmaking is underrated, and his ability to navigate in that sort of way is underrated, provided he can handle the physicality of the league. Can I grab our first break here?
Let's do it.
Today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And Kyle, they have a promotion going on. And I want to know, if you had to pick these 4 NFL games this weekend, how you would pick them. Jack, just win-loss. No spread.
Okay.
Win-loss. Jacksonville at Chicago.
Jacksonville.
Indianapolis at Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Los Angeles Rams at Denver.
You mean the Chargers, and I would take the Chargers.
Sorry, Chargers. I messed that up. And Tampa Bay at New Orleans.
Tampa Bay. It just blows them out. Spencer Rattler has no chance.
So if you go to Treasure Island Resort and Casino for free with your Island Passport Club, go to one of the kiosks. You can enter this again for free. You pick those 4 games correct, and if you do pick them correctly, you get $100 in free slot play. It's one of the many promotions that they have at Treasure Island. It's called their Sunday Selections option there, and we've been telling you about Treasure Island and obviously about this Island Passport Club deal. And if you are going to go down to Treasure Island, make sure you do this. If you like the NFL, make sure you play this game. It's free shot at $100. But also with the Island Passport Club, $10 off Island Bingo, free appetizer at the steakhouse, a free drink, 4 free day passes to their indoor water park. I don't know if you think about taking your family somewhere for MEA or whatever. Like, there is a lot to do at this place outside of just it being a casino. You get 10% off the wave spa, 1 hour of free bowling, free promotional item at the gift shop, and 10% off your hotel stay. So if you are considering going to Treasure Island, visit ticasino.com for more details. We're also brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and we're getting close to Wolves Fest, guys. Today's October 10th and October 19th from 3 to 7 p.m. at Falling Knife, like we have the past couple of years, I think. We are doing Wolves Fest. It's just a kind of day, Saturday afternoon block party at Falling Knife around the Wolves. Kyle and I have been working with Falling Knife this summer about partnering on a special beer that's going to be released at Wolves Fest. As I mentioned before, it's called the Second Apron. So it's going to be a fun day. It's the Saturday right before the season starts on Tuesday. Britt and I are going to do a live show at 5:00. But again, put that on your calendars. Saturday, October 19th. Get pumped for the Wolves season. Hang out with some Wolves fans. Come hang out with Britt and I. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. All right, Kyle. Do we have anything else we want to hit on with Rob, or do you want to get into the questions?
No, I think that wraps it up for Rob. He looked really good in that first preseason game against the Lakers. I can't believe the Wolves had to fly all the way down to Palm Springs for one exhibition game. But I'm excited to see what else he does in the preseason, right? Because you're going to have other guys. Like, I would imagine Mike and Rudy aren't going to play all 5 preseason games, whatever. And then with the rescheduling due to the Lynx game, like, I think the Wolves might have like a back-to-back or something. So I think Rob's going to be given a lot of opportunities to play in the preseason. I'm excited to see what he can do. But like for segment 2, I was just kind of trying to come up with some questions. I've been thinking about some stuff that we haven't. I know you had Jace on this week, and you've had Chris and Britt, and you've been doing all these things, but we haven't really talked about some questions. I just thought it'd be fun to dissect now. So maybe our first ever AMA, Ask More Anything. But I had a couple questions here, so I'm just going to throw them to you, and then we can kind of talk about them. If you think the questions are dumb, we'll just skip them. But this one's big because you trade Carl for Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo and Keita Bates-Diop, and a valuable pick from the Pistons, we hope. But it kind of hit me of like, okay, everyone loves Donte DiVincenzo. And I don't know if you saw this, but Joe Budden retweeted my tweet and was like, I'm going to miss that guy with sad face emoji. So he was very popular in the Knicks despite playing one season. But you go back and look at his basketball reference, and it's like, why has Donte DiVincenzo played for so many different teams in what has been a relatively short career, right? 5 or 6 seasons in the league. So again, I'm eternally optimistic and usually a glass half full guy, but I did want to bring it up because if he is the valuable asset in this Carl trade, I think it's at least worth asking and talking about it, and then maybe coming to a conclusion of, okay, well, why has he bounced around to so many teams in the league? The Bucks, the Warriors, the Kings, the Knicks, and now Minnesota.
I think it's the salary cap. Okay. I think is the primary factor here. But it's interesting. You sent me these questions before. I went through it this morning. So Milwaukee, right, in 2018, they draft him 17th overall, his first round pick. So he gets that 4-year deal. They win the championship in 2021. And then the following year is his, final season of that rookie deal, right? And you're at that point where you were with Ant and Jaden a year ago, where you're like, all right, rookie contract extension time. What are we willing to give? That's going to be a major jump, right? Like Ant jumped from 13 mil to 40 mil this year. Jaden jumped from 4 mil last year to 22 mil. And I think what happened in Milwaukee was they won the championship and they were about to get really, really expensive. And much like the Wolves experienced with like needing to let go of Kyle Anderson last year or this summer, I think DiVincenzo was just kind of a casualty of the salary cap and where, that they just weren't going to be able to give DiVincenzo that jump from 14 to 15 or from 4 million to 15 million or whatever. So he gets traded in that 4th year in Milwaukee. He gets traded to Sacramento, and I'm going to have Brendan Nunez, who covers the Kings, on that first week of the season, and remind me to ask him about DiVincenzo, because the Kings year was weird. Like that half season there did not play well, and just kind of like it seemed like a piece, right, that the Kings were trading for, being like, we're going to trade for him at the deadline so we can give him his next contract. Well, again, I don't know what happened, but he didn't sign a contract with the Kings that next summer. And he went on to sign with the Warriors a 2-year, $9 million contract, $4.5 million a year. The second year was a player option. So after 1 year, he made his $4.5 million with the Warriors and played well. And the Warriors, also super expensive team, did not have the ability to similarly go from $4 million to $15 million or $12 million or whatever to DiVincenzo. So he finally kind of gets his first like break and is like, okay, here's normalcy. I signed a 4-year, $48 million deal with the Knicks, the full mid-level exception. He got that offer from multiple teams, including the Wolves, right, last summer. And he ends up signing with the Knicks. His friends are there, or whatever. It's a great opportunity. He had his best season of his career. Really, really grew as an offensive player last season. Like last year was clearly his best offensive season. So he goes from like, he's one of those $12 million contracts, right, that get traded all the time. I was talking about Jace with this last episode. Like, remember that Ricky Rubio, he signed that like $14 million deal and then got traded like 3 times over the course of it. Or like Gorgie Jang when he was here, he had and just those type of, that number contract is just so often like the fodder that gets put into contracts for salary matching. Cause it's like, all right, competent player, not a small amount of money, but not a big amount of money. It's like, if we stack this $12 million player with a $20, $30 million player, we can get a max player. And that's exactly what they did with Carl. But it's because I think that it was $12 million a year that he's making on the contract. Plus he got so much better that now he's not only on that very tradable type of contract, but it's a valuable tradable contract. And it leads to him getting moved to the Wolves, which is, hopefully a longer term home. But again, he's still on a $12 million contract where it's like, who knows what's going to happen with the Wolves in 2-3 years. Might happen again. But I really think it was a product of circumstance and a product of the teams he was on, salary cap situation that forced him to be moved much more. I mean, I haven't heard anything, at least, about him being any sort of like malcontent. Again, I don't know what happened in Sacramento. That was weird.
I don't think they always know what's going on.
Yeah, right. That could totally just be a Sacramento thing. But when you sent me that question, that's the way I went about asking it, though. I don't know every detail about what DiVincenzo's story has been, but looking at his basketball reference page and looking at what his contracts were and what those teams' salary situations are, to me, that's the story of why he's moved so much.
He'll be the 145th highest paid player this season. And like we've talked about before, every contender has that player in that contract, right? Like he is, I know I hate player comps and you hate player comps, but I'm going to keep giving, he is this team's like KCP in a sense, right? Like bounced around a little bit, but always kind of been on good teams or a valuable contributor to good teams, like what he did to the Lakers. Now he's going to do it with Orlando for KCP. So again, the question was more a little bit of a softball, but I think a lot of the stuff that you just said is stuff that we haven't really covered yet as we try to, because the Julius Randle stuff, and I have a question coming up about him, but that is different in my opinion because he does have a player option, and maybe he finishes his career here. Who knows? But the DiVincenzo piece is so unique because he's tied here for 3 more seasons. And when you do like the who's part of the foundation, I think DiVincenzo now is like part of the foundation, right? Like he is.
I have never in my time covering this team, and again, of course, everybody's blowing smoke right now, so take it with that grain of salt. I have never gotten more holy shit, Dante's awesome texts like about
most of those are from me. So.
Yeah. It's true. No, I think the word is, and again, the words are all positive right now, but the word is like Dante's killing it, and they got to play him, and they got to play him like a lot, and it goes back to the being a really deep team. And I think yesterday, or a couple days ago, when Jace was on, he was like, "Yeah, I think he's gonna play 30 minutes." I'm like,
that podcast was awesome. Like, go listen to the Jason Dane podcast because they did that. They just did the whole what do you call it, the 240 rule, or like try to figure out 240 minutes in an NBA game.
Really
and
hard.
It broke my brain because it's like when you or Jace said he should play 30 minutes, I'm listening, doing laundry. I was like, that's a bad take. And then it's like, actually, no, he should probably play at least that.
But good luck. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna all fit together, but I mean, like major Kyle Anderson Finch vibes. Like he's gonna love this guy, and he can shoot, which is something Kyle couldn't do. But Donte can handle in the same way that Kyle could. Kyle played a ton of point guard last season. Like I think people who didn't watch the Wolves be like, "What are you talking about?" Kyle Anderson played a ton of point guard. All of us who watch the Wolves know Kyle Anderson played a ton of game manager quarterback. Donte DiVincenzo is going to play game manager quarterback. Kyle Anderson provided an extra perimeter defender for the team, which was so invaluable because Jaden McDaniels got in foul trouble every other game. They needed that. They needed another guy who could go and guard a 2 from the other team. DiVincenzo is going to be able to do that. Plus, he hits so many of the things that we know this team wants to change: playing faster, shooting more threes, being more physical. Like I get the trade more and more every day from what the Wolves how the Wolves want to play it, and how Donte is able to at least theoretically fill those roles.
Yeah, we haven't talked on the mic since that first. Well, we did talk on the mic since that first preseason game, but just that three he hit, that second three he hit, where he just kind of comes in like a transition situation, but it's people are trying to figure out, are they going to set an offense or whatever, and he just kind of looks and he's like, I'm just going to take this. Like
it's like the guy you hate playing pickup with, who just like comes down and bombs.
It's like having
he makes it.
It's like getting a garage after, as a first time homeowner. Like I had a nice apartment for 7 years, and you've been there, but I get this first house. Like I can just drink beer in my garage and just watch TV. Like that's DiVincenzo. They haven't really had a player that can just kind of just bring the ball up the court and just take what is a 40% 3-pointer from 30 feet. Like it's just, he is going to be incredible. And again, why has he bounced around so much? Back to like the Rob Dillingham stuff. Sometimes it's not always the player, right? It is like the situation. And I think you and Brendan talking about the Kings thing will be really eye-opening, because when I was like looking at his transaction history, it's like the Kings declined to offer him the qualifying offer, like to make him a free agent. It's like, wait, that guy was the centerpiece, we think, in a Karl-Anthony Towns trade, and the Kings were like, "Now we don't even want to like negotiate with you."
That's a great point, and that's the weird thing. What that says to me, and I don't know this, but that says like agent got in there and was flexing and was like, "Get me the hell out of there,"
Yeah.
And because he was a restricted free, should have been a restricted free agent. You need to be offered the qualifying offer to become a restricted free agent. So I think something happened where it got flexed so as to not be offered the qualifying offer, which made him an unrestricted free agent, which gave him the opportunity to be able to sign with Golden State, right? Like, again, I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but something did. What's the next question?
Again, these are just questions to maybe flush out some of the concerns that you could have, because there are still people feeling emotions over the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. So my second question to you was just, what do you think the worst case scenario is for the Julius Randle Rudy Gobert pairing, in terms of maybe on the court or transactional or roster building down the road? You can kind of take it anywhere you want, but I'm coming at it from the perspective of, even if it doesn't maybe click as well as the best version of Karl and Rudy did, there's just, back to the depth, so many other options they can do to make this all work. Like one of them being having the 6th man of the year that you can just kind of plug in for more minutes. But what would it look like to you in the worst case scenario?
They don't like each other. I mean, that would be the worst case scenario, right?
No, that's a great answer. They fight on the court. Never seen that before.
I mean, and I'm not saying that's likely. I think most people that would be like, oh, like fit issues and, stylistic. And I think like that the stylistic trope is something people in our job do a lot, right? Where it's like and obviously like stylistically, like some things are hard. I'm not saying this is it's black and white and it's like right or wrong there. I just think we sometimes overrate like stylistic fits, and with a good coach and in a good environment of a good team, I think that stuff is easier to iron out than we typically talk about with those sort of things. I have, and part of this is like empowered by some belief that I have in the idea that Randle and Finch worked together in New Orleans, really turning Julius's career around there. I think Finch at least has an image in his head of how to make the stylistic fit work. I don't have the clip here, but it's because it was like last week. But I asked Finch that, and he was like, I don't see like stylistic issues. And he referenced the things that we've referenced. He's like, Julius made All NBA twice playing next to Mitchell Robinson. And I mean, who's a better Rudy Gobert comp in the league than Mitchell Robinson, right? Like stylistically, like he's at least played with that before. So I'm not saying that stuff's going to be perfect, but I think much like it was with Carl, over time, if you give it 20, 40 games, like that, those stylistic issues will be able to be ironed out. The things that wouldn't be able to be ironed out, and this isn't a Rudy or a Julius thing, but it just happens sometimes in the NBA, is like personalities clash. Rudy and D'Angelo Russell had personalities that clashed. And that doesn't mean those two were a terrible fit together. The Wolves were, the Wolves had success with those two together too. But I think if you're asking me what the worst case scenario is, it's that those two do not have a like personality chemistry together that helps them, maximize each other on the floor. It's not my expectation, but I think that's the worst case scenario there.
I think that's a great answer. Again, just promoting the company podcast, but the one you did with, what was it, Knicks tape or whatever? Someone who covers the Knicks on a daily basis.
Mixed. That'd be a good one. Knicks tape. Knicks film room.
Yeah, Knicks film room. That's mine. That's on me. But no, I the thing, you're getting all these texts, right? That Donte DiVincenzo just, holy shit, he's awesome. The Randle stuff that comes out of New York, or maybe just kind of from a national perspective from 30,000 feet, is more, I mean, yeah, dude, he's all NBA, he's a multi-time all-star, like he's a dude, but it's kind of been more about the personality stuff, right? Like kind of moping on the court or just had like bad body language. And I'm just going to be fascinated to watch that because, when you watch DiVincenzo talk, or Ant, like this is Ant's team, or Rob, this is a good body language team. Like I know the Kyle Rudy thing that happened a couple of years ago, but this is probably one of the better vibe teams in the league. And again, that's probably because they're winning games now. But I wonder, the Randle stuff, I know you joked about it, but when he talked about just the food scene in Minneapolis or it being like a slower pace, what he's used to like in Texas, I wonder if the things that Knicks fans are telling us to be on the lookout for might just kind of evaporate organically because he's kind of going from being covered and criticized from Stephen A. Smith to like Britt Robson. Like it's just going to be easier. You know what I mean? Like it's just, this is not, no offense to all my best friends that cover the team. Like this is not a hard market to play in. No. So I just wonder if with like lower expectations to a sense, even though this team is kind of a championship contender, I just wonder if that in and of itself, the comments he's made about letting Ant know that he's got a dog next to him, and I want to get into some physicality stuff in a second, but I just wonder if his personality fit will be way less of an issue than maybe outsiders who have watched him more and have more information and intel than we do, if it just won't be that big of an issue. But I think it's a really good answer because sometimes if you don't click with a guy, no matter what Finch is trying to do,
right,
it's not going to work.
Let's grab another break and come back with a couple more questions. All right, Kyle, what else do you have for questions?
I've got a couple. I'll hit you with two more, and then we can wrap this up. But this one is really big. I don't know if anyone's really asked this yet, but if not, you should throw this to Finch as the preseason moves on. But straight up, this team is so deep. That's what we've talked about. Depth. How difficult do you think it is to actually manage a 10-man rotation?
I think it's easier than we might think, provided you have players who are comfortable with their role being a little bit volatile. Like being like, some nights I'm gonna play 22, some nights I'm gonna play 32, or some nights I'm gonna play 12, some nights I'm gonna play 22. And I think like just looking at we could go through each one of them outside of like the main guy. Like the main guys are going to get their 32, 34, whatever. But guys like Nas, guys like DiVincenzo, guys like Mike Conley, even maybe Julius Randle more than Cat. Like, are you comfortable with a little bit of variance in your minutes played? Because I think you have to have that variance so as to be able to get to 10 guys. Because if we just do, again, the 240-minute rule thing that Jason and I were talking about, you can't just have some guy be like 4. Like very rarely do players only play 4 minutes. Like it might be on average, like it's 12 this time, it's DNP. The other game, there just needs to be like a little bit of room for variance if you're going to go to a 10-man rotation. I think Vince is pretty comfortable with navigating that. I think he historically has been. And I think like with Carl, and Carl was obviously a very good player, but there were times where maybe based on the matchup, you're playing a smaller team or whatever, it might have made more sense to not have him and Rudy, or maybe Rudy would have had to sit. But there was like, it felt like they really had to play Cat and Rudy 30 minutes a night every single night. And I'm not sure you have to do that with both Rudy and Julius Randle, because particularly if you are giving Julius Randle like the starting job, like that's your thing. I think the trade-off for Julius Randle to be the no-brainer starter every game is that like sometimes he's got to be cool with when Nas is going and he's having I'm going to make 7 of my 10 threes I take tonight game. Like, let's let him do that, as the Wolves did in the playoffs. We saw some people are like, what are you talking about, Dane? Like Carl often didn't play 30 minutes in the playoffs. That's what I'm talking about. Like there needs to be a comfort with letting guys roll when they're hot, or an opportunity that the matchup presents. And I think they can do that. Maybe start at 10 and then, much like they did last year, but by 20 games into the season, right? Like Troy Brown Jr. was out of the rotation. He was the 10th man, right? And you kind of cut that out. But by starting wide and kind of honing in from there, I don't know. I think you can start with 10.
For what it's worth, I think it's more difficult than
Sure.
you think, but it's just, again, it's a fun thing to monitor going forward, because to me, the answer has to be tied into whether you're winning or losing. Because if you're winning a bunch of games and you start out 12-4 or 20-8, then everyone's gonna be like, yeah, this is all part of the process. Like, I'm contributing my role, whatever, we're winning. It's when you aren't winning games that guys are gonna, be like, I should get more minutes, right? And there are plenty of guys on this team that I know they've all answered it really well, but in the back of their mind somewhere is the fact that, Rudy Gobert has a player option next summer, and so does Julius Randle, and Nikhil's a free agent, and Nas could opt out. Like, I just think it's something interesting to monitor, because again, they have so much depth, they seem cohesive, and the chemistry is really strong, and the vibes are great. But, if they're 8-8, I could see guys that aren't maybe Ant or Jaden being like, hey, if you give me more minutes, I can help turn this thing around. So that'll be something to monitor. I'm sure Finch will have all the right answers, but I don't know. There are things to be concerned about or worry about or just keep an eye on as this season starts, and I think that's probably one of them.
It's totally fair pushback, because I've definitely been the guy in previous seasons of like, why are you playing 10 guys?
Right.
Like I've definitely
Right.
done that at the beginning of, but I do think I better understand what like Finch's idea here is of starting wide and kind of narrowing as the season goes on, because then you get like Terrence Shannon Jr. to get some minutes here and there, and if Jaden McDaniels rolls his ankle and needs to miss a week, then Shannon needs to be in the rotation, right, for a week. Then it's not his first time playing in an NBA game. You know what I'm saying? Like there's, I think that, and I know Minot's not a rookie either, but kind of like the same thing would hold true with him. Just not necessarily making their first experience a situation where you need them, you know, and instead just kind of being gifted an opportunity early on. That would be my expectation. But I just said Terrence Shannon Jr. and Josh Minot, and I don't think they're in the top 10. So, yeah.
And the one pushback to my pushback, and you've heard this on the record, off the record from players on the team now, you've heard it like from Austin Rivers after he left, or even like a Taurean Prince, is that the one thing that Wolves do have is a head coach who is going to communicate very clearly to you, like, you're not in the rotation, but this is what you could do to be in the rotation. So I think that's also a dynamic that I think it's going to be a little more difficult or challenging at times to manage having so many good players. Like, oh my God, what a great champagne problems, but it is going to be a real thing.
Austin Rivers was in the playoff rotation 2 years ago. That's crazy. That's a signal of the depth. And Austin was a good, vet for this team. But when we start talking about, like Austin Rivers as your 7th or 8th man versus Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like it's a gap.
Was that, seriously, I'm asking you on the fly, was that because Jaden and Nas were both out?
Yeah. That was Nas broke his wrist and Jaden punched the wall. Oh. Kyle Anderson got his eyeball poked out.
Our pets' heads are falling off. Austin, get in there. Okay, this is my favorite question because this is really basketball-y. I think I actually saw this originally from like Caitlin Cooper, who does a really good job of covering the Pacers. But I think they had like a coaches symposium recently in the league, and Rick Carlisle kind of blurted this out. But there are rumors, reports swirling that this season the NBA might kind of embrace more of an international style of play in terms of physicality and just not having so many whistles and less fouls, letting the game kind of not hand check, but like be a more physical game, because I think people really like watching that on the international stage. So throwing it back to you again, if it's true that it's going to be not an aggressive whistle this upcoming season and there's going to be more kind of lenience with how physical guys can get at all levels, how does that benefit the Timberwolves? And then my fan side, does it benefit them maybe more than anyone?
Yeah, well, I'll just first say, like, this started last season, right? And I think those of us who are watching a lot of NBA, like, we noticed that, right? After, kind of like the All-Star break, trade deadline, and the style of the game evolved, I think, in a good way. And I think clearly some adjustments were made in the refereeing department. And I'm pretty sure that got positive reviews from the majority of teams. So I think I don't know if they're going to lean into it further. I don't think it's going to be like more pro wrestling than last season. But I think it's an affirmation, or it can lead us to assume that it's going to be like it was at the second half end of the season last year. Again, better to answer this question, though, is Chris Finch, who was asked about it at practice yesterday.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate it being the same going into this year? How do you think that plays in?
Yeah, I think the league did a good job post All-Star break of kind of adjusting their whistle on certain plays that they were rewarding through the course of the year, that the league as a whole, whether it be players, coaches, stakeholders, didn't feel that were worthy of fouls. And I don't think the league made a conscious decision to say, hey, we're going to let it be more physical. I just thought they did a good job of cleaning up some whistles that they were rewarding. And as a result, I thought we got a better basketball product, and all credit to the league for that course correction.
When you talk about Julius and not being able to get hit first, guys,
in
that way, does that even play in more as well?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly allows them to thrive a little bit more in physicality. They're hitting first guys offensively as well. Especially Julius is really good. I think he's still going to draw a lot of contacts, a lot of legitimate fouls. So that's something we need.
Sure, going to be nice, Kyle, once the Wolves no longer have like 25 players at training camp and there's not that many bouncing basketballs in the background. I'm sorry about that. Like, this is where we do media. I have a shotgun mic on there. It's just like literally Joe Ingles and Julius Randle were standing directly behind me right there, like doing a shooting drill. So just to listeners, I apologize for the sound. We're doing we're doing the best we can, but it's loud. Like a scoreboard fell down in the practice facility yesterday while I was there. It was like, I thought like a hoop. I thought like Rudy dunked or something. But
if you thought that was hard to listen to on the pod, just know from my experience, it's even harder to listen to when you're actually there at shoot around. But again, if you're, I mean, that's why this podcast is so awesome, because I think those little clips are really, really good to just get. And I think Finch had a really great answer there if you could hear it. But just to kind of, I'll throw it back to you again, just kind of sum up what he said, but also then take that and run with what you think, to my original question, how this could benefit a team that has an identity of playing physical and playing tough defense.
Yeah, like he brings up Julius, right, as a player who would benefit from it because he's such a physical player, which is like true. But I think about it more as benefiting players who are physical defensively. There's more you can get away with. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know, like, is Julius going to get called for less charges? Like, was that what Finch's implication was there? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's more true for DiVincenzo, who's clearly like an aggressive on ball, like hand on your hip sort of guy. That like makes more sense to me. I think it benefits Jaden McDaniels as a defender. I think we saw that last season with his, I mean, I haven't looked this up specifically, but off of the top of my head, I think Jaden started fouling a lot less the second half of the season after the rules kind of changed. I think I think there's I think it's a good thing, right? We got to a ridiculous point of it, but I don't think it benefits Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards, two very physical players, because those guys are trying to get fouls when they go downhill going to the basket. So I don't know. For me, it's kind of like a to be determined, but I'm for it just because I think it's a better brand of basketball to me.
Oh, one thing you said there that was just an elite take. It absolutely is a bad thing for Anthony Edwards. Simply because I don't know if you started watching Starting Five on Netflix, but
I haven't yet, but I'm noticing that I have to.
It's incredible. But there was like the in-game mics that they had on the five players is incredible. Like you're getting sound bites that you've never heard before. But there was one where Ant like grabs an official and is like, "Hey, when I yell, I want you to know it's nothing personal. I just don't know how to flop. So like I don't know what to do." Like that was just Ant being Ant. But again, he's going to probably, if the rules are what the rules are going to be moving forward and they're going to allow a lot more, Anthony Edwards is going to lead the league in technicals because he's going to make so many sounds and you know what I mean? But bigger picture, I just, anytime you think of the Timberwolves' best defensive moments, you think about that Nuggets game where they just completely locked down everyone.
Great point.
And if that's what the league is, I mean, they're not going to play like that every single night. It's borderline impossible, even though the depth should help to just plug and play more defenders. But if that's what the league is kind of going to turn into, and like you said, it did shift last season after the All-Star break, I just think that's another element that we need to remember or kind of keep tabs on, because if you're letting the best defensive team in the league play more physical defense, that's a problem for the opponent.
Yeah. Do you want to do the fifth question? Final one?
It was just basically, again, we've talked about a lot of different guys this week and since training camp started, but I'm just curious for your input on, we're watching Carl now play with the Knicks and we're starting to get acclimated with DiVincenzo and Randle on the team. Who do you think is going to benefit the most from those two additions on the team? And then who do you think might, I don't want to say benefit the least, but maybe have a role reduced or maybe see the least profit because of adding two new rotation players who might also be semi-core foundation pieces?
Yeah, just to take the least one first, who's going to benefit least, I put down Josh Minott and Terrence Shannon. But maybe particularly Minott, because I do think he's at the point of like, it's time for an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know if that opportunity is going to be there again, just if we do the numbers and minutes game. So whatever, I don't really have a further take than that. It's just, you added a guy, you pushed him down. I think for Dillingham, it's kind of beneficial because like we said at the beginning, he doesn't have to play 18 minutes a night. I think that's a good thing. I think with Minott, it just lowers his chances of playing, or Terrence Shannon Jr. So it's just like on a personal level to them, you're probably not pumped to do it to have your team make a 2-for-1 trade for two rotation players. I don't totally have my head wrapped around who benefits most from the addition, but I'm like really confident my answer is Mike Conley.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think like the Conley DiVincenzo thing is going to be a great pairing. Like, I think when you go those two guys in the backcourt, and when I say I don't have my head wrapped around it, I'm not really sure how they get to that from a rotation standpoint. Like, Mike's, just because he's old, is like the first guy to sub out of the game, right? We assume DiVincenzo is going to come off the bench, and he's probably going to be the first guy into the game, or him and Nas, right? So I don't like know how they get a ton of their minutes together, but I think they want to play DiVincenzo and Conley together. I think like we've been talking a lot about the addition of shooting and the addition of movement shooting in DiVincenzo. And what I've pushed back a little bit on the idea of with DiVincenzo being a movement shooter is that I don't think he's a guy that you run like pin downs for and he's coming sprinting off. I mean, not none, but it's not like Malik Beasley did with this team a few years ago. I don't think that's the type of shooter that DiVincenzo is. I think Mike Conley is that type of shooter. And I think when you have Conley and DiVincenzo on the floor together, DiVincenzo can be your point guard, and you can use Mike Conley as your movement shooter so as to get Mike more threes. His 3-point percent, I mean, he shot the lights out last year. And to me, what that always signals is you need to shoot more threes. If you're shooting 45% from three, you're not shooting enough threes. It's just like the Wolves. They led the league in 3-point percentage last year, but they're 20th in volume. That if you're first in 3-point percentage, you're not shooting enough of them. I think DiVincenzo will be able to help Mike be more of an offensive weapon from a shooter standpoint, whereas Mike was obviously a shooting weapon last year, but a lot of his value was as, the quarterback of the offense, getting them into pick and roll. Was really the only guy who could run spread pick and roll consistently with this team. Again, we got to figure out if DiVincenzo, Nikhil, Rob can do that. But I think by adding another primary ball handler in DiVincenzo, Mike Conley is able to play a more perimeter oriented game than like a downhill game. And that seems to me like a healthy adjustment for a 37-year-old.
Yeah, those are good answers. I definitely crafted this question without answering it myself, so I don't really know. But again, I'm really bullish on this team. I don't know how you aren't. I enjoy the fact that they're probably going to stylistically switch it up a little bit, maybe play more physical, maybe take more threes, despite losing such a great 3-point shooter. But I think it's like the 10-man rotation stuff or the body language with Randle. I think it's just important to monitor because I've gotten better at this as I've gotten older, but you just can't have like everything, right? Like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't not everyone's going to flourish from here. This is kind of why a couple weeks ago I was like, maybe Nikhil takes a step back, right? Because he would be an answer that I would throw out because I think Nikhil is awesome. And I think he's had a career year and he's, even getting better at just 25. But I'd be, remiss if I didn't say that DiVincenzo probably just going to get more minutes than him. So how does he handle a potentially lesser role? Rudy Gobert, like, I don't know. Like, does the team lean into just smaller ball lineups and they try to dial down his minutes a little bit? Or I don't know, like the Randle Mitchell thing is really interesting, but I got to see it, right? Like I saw Carl after a while really speak pretty fluent French and have a connection with Rudy. He also was the guy that maybe tried to make it work the earliest, right? Before he got hurt in that year one of the experiments. So I got to see Randle click with a guy that personality-wise is probably a lot different than Mitchell Robinson. So I just think it's something to monitor. Again, this team should be projected to, win a ton of games. They have maybe the most depth in the Western Conference. Like, they don't have to play Bronny James on October 22nd like the Lakers do. But there's going to be some issues that they have to resolve, right? That's just kind of how these 82-game seasons work, ebbs and flows. So that would be one that I'm curious about is you bring in, anytime a deep team makes a 2-for-1, or in this case, a 3-for-1 trade, it gets harder because now you have more good players. So
let's do some prize picks.
Yes.
Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, prizepicks.com, Prize Picks app. You can use the promo code Dane for a $50 bonus when you submit your first $5 lineup. Kyle and I, at the end of the week, we like to put together a Prize Picks lineup. I will note that Jason and I were doing this on Tuesday, and I said, you know what? I like Ken Walker at more than 52.5 rushing yards. That has, I hope you got it in there, because that has since moved up to 63.5 rushing yards. What are two that you like, whether it be tonight for the Thursday night game or just in general for this week?
Yeah, if you get this in, if you're listening on Thursday before Thursday Night Football, I like Brock Purdy less than 31 passing attempts. I'm a Seahawks guy because I have some futures on them, and watching them play the Giants last week, that's actually down to 30.5. I just think they're going to run the ball a lot. You could also kind of pair this with like a Jordan Mason over 18 rushing attempts. I just think they're going to control the clock. I think the Seahawks are down at defensive tackle, so they're going to run the ball a lot. That's their bread and butter. Must-win game for the 49ers, by the way. And then my other one really quick, just because I've told you this, and he's my favorite player, and I think you might have traded him already. Brian Thomas over receiving yards. Don't care what the number is. Just click the more button every week. He's a stud. He's my favorite player. Go Brian Thomas Jr. Go.
I am scared. I did trade Brian Thomas Jr. in my fantasy league yesterday, and I was texting Kyle about. You approved of the trade, though.
I know. You're 1-3. You got to figure it out. 1-4. Yeah. Sorry, week 6.
I know. So that's how it works. I didn't go through and pick any of my. I gave you other ones before. I like Ken Walker, but that number has moved up. Again, super fun way to again, if you do like football, you do play fantasy football, and if you somehow don't have any Seahawks or 49ers on your fantasy team, this is a way to have something going on tonight's game. Again, I know they're longer shots, but it is fun to just be like, all right, this is two players I think are going to have, really big games. And what you can do with Thomas here, if you boost his up from 57.5 to 79.5, it goes from a 3-to-1, payout to a 5-to-1 payout. I think those are fun to do because you can turn your $5 into $50 or whatever it might be with those. So PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane for a $50 sign up bonus when you submit your first lineup for $5. Kyle, do we have anything else we need to hit on?
Yeah, I know this is going a little long, so appreciate everyone listening and supporting those that support us. But I think it's timely because I was thinking about this last night before the news even dropped. But we're recording this the morning of October 10th, and the Minnesota Twins are for sale.
Yeah.
And I am now, for about the last 82 hours, a diehard Padres fan. But I just baseball playoffs are maybe the best playoffs in professional sports. The energy, it's just crazy. The memories you're making going to a baseball game with your mom or your dad or your kid, it's just incredible stuff. And I just don't really have a well-formed take here. But if you're a Minnesota sports fan, you understand what the Twins did with their payroll and stuff and new ownership coming in. Hopefully that opens up the coffers a little bit and you invest. But man, if you own a professional sports team and you treat it like a business, you're a fucking idiot. Bar none. And that's why this is going to come up in a month and a half, right? We're talking about all this basketball stuff and all this depth and 10-man rotation and can they win the finals and all this stuff. Whoever does eventually win arbitration for the Timberwolves ownership, and I have the side that I would like to win because I believe that, new blood and new energy has really reinvigorated this dormant franchise, but just invest, man. I get text messages still. I don't know if you've heard anything else, but people don't know how to watch Timberwolves games, and they're concerned that the cat thing was a financial decision, and I don't think it was, even though it created more flexibility. But man, if you have an opportunity, owning the Twins or the Timberwolves or the Mets is not like owning Google. It just organically grows. It just makes more money, right? The Timberwolves were sold for $1.5 billion, and now they're just worth probably $3 billion, no matter who gets the team. If you just disrespect a fan base who pays money in any sport, and this is across the world, and you try to treat it like a business and you care about your bottom line, you are such a loser. I don't care. There's no CFO that can tell me, we got to. No, you stay at the Four Seasons every time you travel. Or the Ritz-Carlton. You spend money, you're good, okay? Dane and I are staying at the AC Hotel in LA, okay? We're going to be sleeping on top of each other. So don't tell me about how you got to balance budgets. Invest. It's a different type of asset than any other thing. Invest, because no one cares if you made 12 million or lost 13 million in a season. Watching these baseball playoffs, man, seeing people cry that are Mets fans, or just watching the energy and the community that is created, thinking back to the Wolves making their run, those are some of the best memories of my life. So, I don't know. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But if you own a sports team, invest, because this isn't a business. This is bigger than a business, and fans deserve, in all sports, in all cities, to have a team that is trying to win, because that's all you should be caring about, not your bottom line, about how many wins and losses you have.
Did you see Tom DeLonge, the lead singer from Blink-182, leading all the small things at the Padres game?
I'm telling you, Abby and I really like Blink-182. We were almost in tears. Oh, shocker, Kyle cried. Yeah, we love that, because that's like a memory, right? Like, no one cares about, did you see?
That's what I was thinking about. I was like, man, that'd be sick at Target Field. And, Tom is from San Diego, and he's just like beaming, like walking around. Is it still Petco Park, right? Like, no, I don't know. Like, where the whole place is singing all the small. I mean, come on. I'm a big Tom fan. But
did you see what their expense report was in September? Like, no one cares, man. We're singing Blink-182 with the head singer, and the Padres have more swag than any team. So just again, that has nothing to do with the first hour of what we talked about. But ownership really matters, and a lot of the stuff that you and I still talk about, and I'm learning this more and more with the team I cover, but the teams I cheer for. You got to have strong ownership, and this will be a thing that unfortunately just kind of floats above everyone's head as this team does enter a season with more talent than ever, more expectations than ever, and it can all just get derailed if you have ownership that just, doesn't want to invest in trying to make, again, winning titles is all that should matter to any team out there, not trying to win, profit.
We'll close on this. I do think, just like economically, we're entering an interesting time in professional sports ownerships and valuation. Obviously, they've opened it up for investment firms to be able to own percentages of sports franchises, and those VC firms or whatever are hungry to buy into these, because the valuation, particularly in the NBA, is just ascending, and I am curious, and this is a ripple effect of 3-4 years down the line. It's like COVID, how is COVID going to impact the economy? Well, it's probably going to really impact it 3-4 years down the line, right? It's just, it's just when a change happens, it takes some time for the economic impacts to really be felt. And not to pee on your parade here a little bit, but I do think, given the valuation of these, and again, this isn't a Wolves or Twins thing, or I'm not well versed enough in any of this to speak on it as an authority, but I do think a greater percentage of teams are being owned as business assets than they were 20 years ago when we were kids. And I am curious what the impact of that is on leagues as a whole. Look at the Celtics getting sold. There's just there are, and that's that's a second apron thing. So this is an extremely complicated economic thing, and apples to oranges, and from baseball to basketball to football and all that. But I don't know, man. I think just sports teams have gotten so valuable that they aren't just a fun toy for a billionaire to play with anymore. And the thing is, though, if you are the billionaire owner who continues to treat it like a fun toy and is not as concerned about the bottom line, I think you have a real opportunity for gain relative to the rest of the leagues. If 18 owners now are treating their teams in the league more like a business, well, those other 12, 14 teams have an opportunity to be all right, well, we are going to sign a guy to the mid-level exception and take on a greater tax burden. And now we have Donte DiVincenzo and you don't, whatever. And those seem marginal, but that's probably a couple wins, and a couple wins makes a big difference even in baseball. Right. So yeah, that's I don't know. Neither the Twins part's neither here nor there. I haven't really been I'm not a good baseball fan anymore, but it is an interesting.
That's because your team won a
sportsy
title.
thing.
Because Dane is a historic Cubs fan, and you win a title, and now you're just like, yeah, whatever. Life is good. Okay. Some of us have, outside of the Lynx, like we have not had any men's professional success for a long time. But I think that's true. I think more and more teams are kind of treating like that. I also think more and more businesses of all shapes, colors, and sizes are asking you to tip. That doesn't make it right? Like if I go get a smart water at a gas station and they say, "Oh, would you like to tip 20%?" It's like, I'm sorry, what? So just because more people are doing it in life doesn't make it right. But I think it's interesting because again, the Twins stuff today I think was shocking, and in my opinion, because Minnesota isn't the New York market, right? There aren't Stephen A. Smiths. I think what happens with the Twins could have small reverberations back to the Wolves. It's a great. Maybe the greatest sports city in the world, in my opinion, and I'm biased, but I think it's also small enough that we'll see what happens and how it affects, neighbors in downtown Minneapolis, right? Target Field and Target Center. So,
Sure.
Interesting stuff. Again, not really related to anything we just talked about. The ownership thing, I think, will just continue to be dormant until they pick up arbitration in early November. But ownership matters. Having good ownership in any business,
Totally.
Anyone working here in any school district or whatever, like having good leadership and ownership matters because you got to spend to be successful. So good stuff today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for doing it again. Happy. I wish Kyle a happy birthday a couple days late. The plan going forward is that I am going down to Des Moines for the game on Friday night tomorrow. And Britt and I will do a show after the game from my hotel room in Des Moines, and we will have another basketball game to talk about, which this week's been a little bit like, whoa, they played on Friday and now it's 7 days off. Like, what do we talk about? It'll be good to to see the team play again. Finch said at practice yesterday that they're going to kind of extend out the minutes a little bit more. I think you'll see the starters in not only the second quarter, but the third quarter and maybe even beyond that. So I think this will be our first real look at the team in a preseason context. But I think that'll be fun. And then you'll get your fourth quarter of Josh Minot, Luka Garza, and all that stuff too, which is actually fun and interesting. I like that stuff. Like Jalen Noel 5 years ago, you're like, whoa, 26 points, scored 20 in the fourth. It's gonna be fun to have another game to talk about. That'll be me and Britt on Friday night, come out on Saturday morning. Until then, he's Kyle. Follow him on Twitter at Kyle Theige. Listen to him on Flagrant Howls as well. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Yep. Until Saturday morning. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.